and this is what her doctor said. I still can't believe it to this day, that I was creating unnecessary stress on this woman. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really awesome we're talking about this, because I feel like when people come to Nikki and I, they're restricting to try to calm down symptoms. But like they could still be under eating in the process of restricting, but it's coming from a different place. I also see there's sort of these stealth, like sometimes stealth people that come to work with us that may be restricting for symptoms, but have also been chronic dieters that you don't really realize, like, oh, and maybe there is a component of a lot of physical activity and just not matching the intake that they need to be at. And even me, sometimes I'll talk to them and I'm like, oh, what is it? What are you eating? Like, do you feel good? And they're like, yeah, I think I'm eating enough. And I'm like, let's like double check. And, you know, when we look underneath the curtain or pull back the curtain, it turns out they're way under eating for what they're actually doing. And I think because we live in such a thin-centric world, like everything's about cutting calories, like I feel like people's reference points completely off, especially from a woman standpoint. You know, maybe there's an intentional dieting piece for a lot of women that I think underlies some of the gut issues coming up, and then they focus on restricting other things like low FODMAP, things like that. And then I also wonder too, again, if there's a lot of people that are unintentionally under eating, that aren't necessarily specifically dieting, but they're still doing high intensity workouts, CrossFit, maybe even not that intense, but still just under eating for what they're doing, and how that impacts the gut can be huge. And it's very easy to get caught up in supplements and things that you need to do supplementally and like the fanciness of treating gut issues. But if you're not nourished, it's going to be impossible to really make progress. And it sounds like you learned that through your journey, which is, I'm so glad that you're here to talk about that, because I think it's such a huge issue. Like we don't typically, I don't think we have yet talked about sort of how just the undercurrent of our culture being so diet focused might be affecting gut issues across the board, and maybe that could be a root causal factor that someone's intentionally undereating. We see a lot of unintentional undereating, but there's still some intentional dieters that could be a big root cause for them.
You said something really important about like just the cultural obsession with thinness, because if obviously for my clients, and in my case, there was, like you said, intentional undereating, but I just think women in general have a skewed perspective of what enough food really looks like. So I could see how that would influence people like your clientele.
And I will say, sometimes I've gotten a lot of resistance too, like from a couple clients where we have tried to add calories in and they did start to gain some weight. And that, like, you know, is scary if you're someone who has been dieting for a while, that there's a big fear around that. And I think I have one particular case. This is like right when I started out as a dietitian out of school. It was the first summer that I was seeing clients. And I was working with a woman who was also in the health space. So she was like a coach of some sort, a health coach, if I remember right. And she was, you know, getting 1,200 calories a day and lifting maybe 3 times a week, doing like pretty active. She had like a young child, feeling miserable, like had every symptom that you could imagine of being undernourished. And we kept slowly building calories up because she was like very apprehensive, and she did gain, you know, maybe 10 pounds or so, like during our time. And I'm like, you know what, like it's a part of the process. Your body's hasn't been used to getting what it needs. But I remember like, so with this particular client, she went to her doctor and this is what her doctor said. I still can't believe it to this day, that I was creating unnecessary stress on this woman, that she didn't need to eat. I think when we stopped, she was at about 1,800 calories. We were like slowly building up. But the doctor like basically was bitching about me, saying like I was stressing this woman out. And then she stopped working with me because she got validation from her doctor, who probably knows nothing.
As though eating 1,200 calories a day and weightlifting 3 times a week was not stressing this person out.
Right. Exactly. So like, and I think what you were saying about before, like the medical system just relying on the BMI so much, and not really understanding nutrition either, and it being sort of a shaming. I feel like it's a very shaming space for a lot of people that are, going through changes. And I don't know, that was very frustrating. That was like traumatizing for me as a new dietitian. I feel like that's why it's like burned into my brain.
Welcome to your new field. Bam.
Right.
Never
Welcome
forget
to
this.
Your new field. Like doctors are gonna like undermine you with a client.
Pretty much.
But yeah, it's that was wild. I don't know if you've ever like had experience like that with some doctors. Before.
I could write a book on how much cursing is allowed on this podcast.
As much as you want.
Yeah, we
go for the gold.
I could write a book on the shit that doctors tell my clients, and it's so like, it's upsetting to me because I don't want to be the person. There's this. I know you guys are aware of this. There's like all this polarization with conventional medicine versus naturopathic integrative functional medicine, and like demonization of conventional doctors. Yeah. And I don't want to be that person because there's plenty of great doctors out there, but it is just maddening, the shit that doctors will tell my clients, whether it's you can't lose your period from undereating unless you're below an 18.5 BMI, whether it's like shaming them about their weight and basically invalidating that they had any issues with food and saying like, oh, you shouldn't have gained this weight, and like just talking to them and triggering them when they know nothing about their case, and also just thinking that they're the authority on weight and nutrition when it's like, you're not, and that's okay. You don't have to be. You went to medical school, like you should be focusing on medicine, and that's good. We need medicine. But yeah, I've had plenty of situations like that, whether it's hormonal, whether it's weight related, whether it's like just literally just perpetuating myths about eating disorders, like telling my clients like there's so much weight bias specifically within, I mean, it's everywhere, but I see it a lot in the conventional medicine world of like, well, no, what do you mean you had an eating disorder? Like you were never underweight, or you look very fit. Like you just lost your period because you're super fit. This is normal. Just get on the pill. I have heard that from most of my clients' doctors. Like I can probably count on 2 of my hands out of all the women I've worked with, the doctors who didn't tell them that. And that's just with hormonal stuff. But yeah, it's a big problem.
Yeah. And I will say one other thing too, and you brought it up, but I wanted to highlight it a little bit. It's that like, I do find it really maddening. And I get that there might need to be some collaboration on it, but like as dietitians, we can't diagnose an eating disorder either, even though like it could be so clear to us. Like it has to be diagnosed by an MD. But yet, like what we're saying now, like MDs are not paying attention to it at all, because all they're thinking about is BMI. Yeah. And not really. Yeah. And I find too that there's so little time that they have with a client that they can't really totally understand the full case. And I feel like they don't really develop the skills to coach because they have, a 10-minute window. Like how are you going to actually coach someone?
Oh yeah. So most of the problem is really the medical system that like makes them that way.
Right.
Well, that's the thing. I think that pretty much everybody, I tell my patients this a lot. I think that most people who get into the medical field, like conventional medicine, probably are good, well-intentioned, smart people who like want to make a difference and they want to help people and they wanted to put their brilliant brains to good use. But then going through medical school, and then going through like a residency or getting a job in the real world burns them the F out.
Exactly.
And then we're dealing with, like, when you go to your doctor, there's a high likelihood that that person is depressed, anxious, has insomnia, or is just fucking miserable because they hate their life and they realize how broken of a system it is. And then guess what? They're not going to give you the time of day. They can't anyway, even if they want to, because they get, 5 or 10 minute appointments and they have to bill your insurance a certain way. But like, I think that a lot of doctors like unconsciously decide to care less, because if they cared more, it would make them more depressed. And I think it's like a self-preservation thing. I think that a lot of doctors kind of like have this don't give a shitness to them, because it's like they're putting up that wall to shield themselves from how horrible their profession actually is.